The dawn was pale, a faint breath over the prairie, and the earth smelled of wet dust and charred wood. Smoke still lingered where the homestead had burned the night before. The fence posts stood like blackened bones, and among them stood a girl barefoot, her toes sunk in cold ash. She wrapped her arms across her chest, trembling, her face turned so no one might see the bruise on her cheek. The wind worried strands of hair into her mouth. She did not move to fix them. She had been walking since the moon was high, walking until her soles were split and bleeding, until the stars themselves seemed to spin above her. She had not cried, not when the house caught fire, not when the man shouted he was leaving, not even when he struck her and left her sprawled in the dirt like something discarded. She saved her tears for no one. Only the prairie heard her whisper, "Don't look at me." It was near sunrise when she saw the first sign of life, a low fence and a quiet horse shifting in its pen. Beyond it, a lone man was bent to his work, hammering a post back into the ground. He had broad shoulders and hair the color of dry wheat, tied back at the nape. His shirt was rolled to the elbows, and his hands were slow and sure. The sight of him startled her as though she had stumbled into something private. She froze. He noticed her, but he did not shout or call. The hammer stilled in his hand, and he turned his head slightly, not all the way, as though careful not to startle a deer at the edge of the clearing. She whispered, hardly louder than the wind, "Don't look at me." The man set the hammer down and knelt beside the fence. Not close, he left the distance between them wide enough to cross if she wished, wide enough to run if she needed. He stayed there, head bowed, waiting. The girl's heart thudded in her throat. She wanted to turn, to keep walking until the prairie swallowed her, but her legs shook so badly she could barely stand. The man reached for his canteen, unscrewed the lid, and set it on the ground between them. He did not speak. Minutes passed. A meadowlark began its song somewhere close. The girl bent slowly, took the canteen in both hands, and drank until the cold water stung her throat. She set it back down and stepped away again. The man did not follow. A door creaked open on the cabin nearby, and another figure appeared, an older cowhand with a limp. He squinted toward the fence, toward her. "Someone out there?" The rancher only nodded once. The cowhand frowned but said nothing more, disappearing back inside. The man at the fence looked at her then, not hard, just enough that she felt the weight of being seen, and for the first time, she did not flinch. She did not stay. Not yet. She drifted along the edge of the property until she found a stand of cottonwoods and crouched among them. The grass was cool, soft against her sore feet, and she rested there until the sun rose higher. When hunger drove her back, there was bread left on the fence post where she had first stopped. She stared at it for a long time, suspicion warring with need, then tore it in half and ate until the ache in her belly dulled. That night she slept near the trees, watching the cabin's single lamp flicker until it went dark. Days passed this way. She remained just out of reach, but the man never sent her away. When she woke one morning, she found a pair of mended shoes on the fence post. They were not new, but they were sturdy, and someone had taken the trouble to patch the leather smooth. She slipped them on, though they pinched, and her throat ached at the smallness of the kindness. Once she heard him humming while he brushed his horse, a soft tune that caught on the wind and carried to her hiding place. The sound was so tender it startled tears from her eyes. She pressed her hands over her mouth so no one might hear. The girl began to sweep the porch when no one was looking, carry buckets of water, scatter grain for the chickens. No one asked her to. No one stopped her. The cowhand watched her one evening and muttered to the rancher that she worked like she had a place here. The man only said, "Let her." When the rain came, she did not run for cover at first. She stood under it until her dress clung to her skin, until her hair plastered over her shoulders. But when the wind cut sharp and cold, she crept to the porch. She stood there dripping, shivering, unsure. The door opened and the rancher stepped out. He crouched to her level as before, slow, careful, his eyes soft in the dim light. "You don't have to come inside," he said quietly. "But you don't have to stay out here alone either." Something broke inside her, quiet as a twig underfoot. She crossed the threshold barefoot, rainwater pooling on the floorboards, and for the first time since the fire, she let herself breathe. The days that followed were slow and silvered, like a stream that takes its time to carve a stone smooth. The girl rose early, sometimes before the rooster, sweeping the porch with a borrowed broom, bringing wood to the fire before the rancher woke. She never spoke much, and he never asked much of her, Yet a quiet rhythm grew between them, something soft enough not to scare away. He worked with a patience she did not understand, mending what was broken, oiling what was dry, giving shape to things that would last. She began to copy his way without thinking, tying knots the way he tied them, brushing down the horses the way he did, even humming once under her breath when she thought no one heard. When she did speak, her voice surprised them both. One evening as the sky was melting into copper, she asked if she might plant flowers near the porch. The rancher looked up from his work, the shadow of a smile passing through his eyes, and said only, "If they'll grow here." The next morning she dug into the earth with her bare hands until the nails were black and the skin raw, and still she worked, as though planting something in the soil might root her to this place. It was not yet spring when trouble came. She saw him first, the man from her past, riding slow along the fence line, a lazy cruelty in the way he held his reins. The sound of hoofbeats froze her, and she nearly dropped the pail she was carrying. He smiled when he saw her, a smile she remembered too well, the one that always came before something mean. "Well," he said, swinging down from the saddle, "ain't you a sight?" Her stomach twisted. The rancher came from the barn at that moment, wiping his hands on a rag, his posture turning still as stone when he saw the stranger. "You looking for something?" the rancher asked, voice low. "Looking for what's mine," the man said, gesturing toward her as though she were a stray calf. "She ran off owing me." The girl stepped back until her shoulders struck the porch post. She wanted to vanish, melt into the wood, and disappear. "She stays here," the rancher said simply. The man laughed. "You think you can keep her? She's got nowhere else to go." The rancher stood very still. He was not a man to raise his voice. Instead, he walked forward until there was only dust between them, and then, before she could understand why, he dropped to one knee right there in the yard, so his eyes were level with hers. "You want to leave," he said, soft as dusk, "you can go. But if you want to stay, you stay. And I won't let him take you." She felt the whole earth hold its breath. The man from her past sneered, waiting for her to run, waiting for her to fold like she always had. Her hands were shaking, but she stepped forward until she stood just behind the rancher's shoulder. "I want to stay," she whispered. Something in her voice was different this time, stronger, steady as a nail being driven true. The stranger spat in the dirt and swore. He looked from the rancher to her and back again, and for a moment she feared he might lunge, but the rancher did not move, did not blink. The silence stretched until the man swung into his saddle again. "This ain't over," he growled. "It is for her," the rancher said. The man rode away, leaving only the wind and the faint smell of sweat and horse. The girl sank to her knees, trembling not with fear now, but with something heavier, relief so deep it almost hurt. The rancher did not touch her. He let her breathe, let her gather herself. Only when she rose did he reach out, not to take her hand, but to offer it if she wished. This time she did not flinch. Her palm found his, rough and warm, and it steadied her. That evening they worked side by side to mend the same fence where they had first seen each other. The sun bled red across the horizon, and the sky turned the color of cooling embers. She held the boards while he nailed them straight. Once their hands brushed, and she did not pull away. When the work was done, they stood watching the last light fade. The prairie was quiet except for the call of a night bird somewhere far off. She turned to him and found that he was already looking at her, not with pity, not with hunger, but with something deep and steady that made her chest ache. The girl who had once begged not to be looked at did not look away. Sometimes the kindest thing a man can do is see you as you are, whole and unhidden, and kneel not because you are broken, but because you are worth standing guard over. The night fell gentle. She stayed by the fence long after, breathing in the smell of wood smoke and earth, feeling the strange new truth settle into her bones. If this tale touched your heart, sit by the fire with us again, subscribe, and let the next story find you.